Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the 22nd Tack Lecture. The first one that we're holding is this beautiful theater. I can tell you that the only exposure I had to this scene as it is now is when we had inaugurated the naming of this. But what a great opportunity for us to celebrate this fabulous facility. The PBK Memorial Hall has a rich history and a long one. And I just found out as I was getting ready for tonight that this is the main stage where the presidential debate of 1976 took place. Anyone can name the two people who debated? So it was Carter and Ford. So that was 1976. Now, of course, that was an event to remember, but nothing compared to what we have tonight. So I'm just gonna jump right in. For those of you who are not familiar, very familiar with the Tack Faculty Lecture Series, this is a special William and Mary tradition that intends to bring in the community to William and Mary and create an opportunity for intellectual conversation with William and Mary faculty. So it gives us an opportunity twice a year to step out of what we do every day and go into a dialogue about an idea. And this idea might range from something that has to do with how we perceive the world to how we can contribute and heal the world. So the lecture is led by a faculty member, and the selection of the faculty member to give the Tack lecture is a great honor, because we have many extremely good faculty members. To choose one or two per year to do this, you can understand how difficult, but also how important and prestigious it is. Ultimately, what we achieve with these lectures is that we invite all of us, those who are here, those who are in our community around us, and friends and family, to look at the world a little differently than how we do this on a daily basis, to have an opportunity to challenge assumptions, to engage in issues that we all think and face in a novel way. So at the very heart of this, what we have is the meaning of what it is to educate, what it means to dedicate ourselves to an idea of lifelong learning. And the way we are able to do this twice a year is due to the generosity of the Tack family. Carl and Martha Tack, who are both alumni from the class of 1972. So it's our way to showcase the creativity of William and Mary faculty, and how when we do research and produce scholarship, we do it with one thing in mind, with the idea that our students are enriched by this and our community benefits from that. So it is an opportunity to actually showcase William and Mary's relentless pursuit of knowledge. So I'm pleased that Martha Tack is here with us tonight, and I want to take the opportunity to thank her for everything that she has been doing to support our university, for this wonderful opportunity. Please join me in I know that Carl wanted to be here too, but it wasn't possible, and I know that they are very private people. So Martha, I appreciate the opportunity to thank you publicly, which I know you do not appreciate very much, but we're very happy to have you here. So I have another opportunity to feel very good tonight and experience pleasure in introducing you my colleague, Omiyẹmi Green. So I hope you bear with me for a while, because usually what we do is we pick a few things that somebody has done and they're representative of what they do. to introduce them. But here we have somebody who has a long list of achievements, and even if I tried to pick a few of them, there's still a lot, and I think that it's great to celebrate them. So bear with me as I really tell you more about Omiyẹmi, for those of you who do not know her. So we have theater at William & Mary. I think it's coming up to almost its 100th anniversary. And so Omiyẹmi is here tonight to discuss and explain and analyze for us the contributions of African Americans to that program and how this has occurred over the past half century. As Omiyẹmi says, now it's the perfect time to build on the legacy of those who have worked to make William & Mary a welcoming artistic home for Black students. So Omiyẹmi is a proud local. She is a graduate of Hampton City Public Schools, as well as a William & Mary alumna. I don't think you're surprised there. She epitomizes who our alumni are, and we're very proud of her. She received her BA in psychology in 2000 and continued on to VCU, where she achieved her MFA in theater education. So Omiyẹmi became an associate professor of communications, media arts, and theater at Chicago State University, and an artist in residence with the Black Cultural Center at Purdue University. Returning to her academic home here at William & Mary, Omiyẹmi became the first Black woman and alumna to earn tenure and promotion to full professor in theater at William & Mary. Yes. For the past 14 years, she has served as the university's African American theater historian. Her accomplishments are legion. As a former Taylor Reevely Interdisciplinary Faculty Fellow, Omiyẹmi collaborated with longtime colleague Dr. Amy Quirk on developing a community university partnership, the Local Black Histories Project. Omiyẹmi was also the recipient of a 2016 Arts and Sciences Faculty Award for Teaching Excellence, a 2016 term professorship as the Sharp Associate Professor of Civil Renewal and Entrepreneurship, and a 2019 Plumery Award for Faculty Excellence. She's also a W.M. Shore Mellon Faculty Fellow from 2018 to 2020. Personally, I've had the great pleasure during the past few months to welcome Omiyẹmi to my office as a Provost Faculty Fellow. And it was a great pleasure for me to get to know her, not only as a colleague, as an accomplished faculty, but also the person that she is, what makes Omiyẹmi do all those wonderful things. She's someone who really takes pleasure in her work and pursues relentlessly interdisciplinary collaborations and inclusive excellence. It has been really, really, a pleasure discussing with her ideas of how to bring together things that are happening at William & Mary that may not always come together effortlessly, and also how to enrich the experiences of our faculty, of our students, of our staff members. I anticipate, great things to come out of this partnership. I know that, and I'm also eager for you at some point to learn about what Omiyẹmi is leading so far. So her work is also recognized by the Black Theater Alliance Awards, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, funding from the National Endowment for the Arts, Culture Works, and the National Endowment for the Humanities. Omiyẹmi generously shares her expertise and mentorship with the students of William & Mary on the main stage and in the classroom. She instructs courses such as Black Acting Theory and Performance, African American Theater History, Theater in a Post-Racial Age, and Reimagining Communities. And she has also taught single author courses on August Wilson and Katori Hall. Omiyẹmi is a very collaborative scholar, as I mentioned before, and other communities and organizations have benefited from her direction and production, and these include Southern Illinois University Carbondale, Illinois Wesleyan, Florida A&M, the Africana Independent Film Festival in Richmond, ETA Creative Arts Foundation in Chicago, and Cadence, where she originated and now serves as the project director for Sightlines BLM. Apparently, this Omiyẹmi is tireless. I don't need to tell you that. And she has really been the inaugural editor-in-chief of the Black Theater Review and the VP for Professional Development for the Association for Theater in Higher Education. There's more. She has published extensively and actually, most importantly, impressively, submitting articles in the Journal of American Drama and Theater, the Journal of American Folklore, and Continuum, which is the Journal of African American Diaspora, Drama, Theater, and Performance. And she also has forthcoming work in Theater Magazine, Applied Theater and Racial Justice, Radical Imaginings for Just Communities for Routledge, and August Wilson in Context out of Cambridge University Press. So I have to stop here because I only scratched the surface, but we are all eager to have Omiyẹmi on the stage. So Omiyẹmi Green, we welcome you as tonight's Tack Faculty Lecture.
Good evening, everyone. Let us go back here to the beginning. Nope. All right. Thank you all for coming through this weather tonight to be here with me. Thank you, Provost Agoras, for your introduction and this opportunity to contribute to the intellectual life of the community through the 22nd Martha and Carl Tack Lecture Series. It is a privilege and honor to offer these remarks during the Year of the Arts at William & Mary. My deepest thanks to the Tack family for your generosity and for your support of William & Mary faculty, intellectual and creative scholarship in this way. I would also like to thank the Tack production team, a mighty collective headed by producer Andrea Harris. That's her new title. I have given her a new title. And Steve Tewksbury of University Events. Andrea, Steve, Shashan, Aaron, Jeff, and a host of others behind the scenes worked diligently to make this event authentic to me, yet as distinguished as the Tack family deserves. I appreciate your responsiveness, your patience and care, and your creativity. I'm also grateful for my colleagues, Professor Ann Mazaka-Balechi, my academic Ibeji, Dr. Shantae Hinton, Dr. Chinua Thelwell, and Dr. Richard Lowry for supporting my Tack Lecture nomination. This project would not be as rich without the support of the Office of the Registrar and the Special Collections Research Center, who went above and below in a very literal way because the archives are in the basement of SWIM, to assist me in navigating the digital system and sorting through the theater archives. My sincerest thanks are also due to my colleagues in theater, Chuck, Marla, Professor Matt Aller, Professor Emerita of Costume Design, Patricia Wesp, Dr. Lori Wolf, Dr. Susan Chast, who no longer works with William & Mary, but was a professor of mine, Dr. Jacqueline McClendon, and Professor Hermine Penson. Their acts of remembering and their assistance with sourcing material and key figures has helped to amplify elements of this talk. Lastly, but not least, I must also thank two additional people, as this lecture would not have been possible without either of them. First, I want to thank my mother, Sandra Green, who insisted that not only would I apply to William & Mary, but that if I were accepted, I would attend, and who also left her newborn grandson yesterday and drove through the torrential rain to be here with me tonight. So, thank you. Secondly, I want to thank Mr. Earl Granger. So 30 years ago, I was a senior at Bethel High School in Hampton, Virginia. I paid my guidance counselor the requisite amount to send official transcripts to the two schools that I had applied to. That would be VCU and William and Mary. I received an offer letter from VCU and a rejection letter from William and Mary. Being the curious person that I am, I called the Office of Admissions for an explanation. Earl Granger, working in the Office of Admissions at that time, informed me that I was denied admission due to an incomplete application. Specifically, they never received my transcript. Now, there is a discussion to be had about academic gatekeeping, but that's not tonight. Tonight is a celebration. Earl advised me to get an official sealed copy of my transcript and send it directly to him. I did, and subsequently was admitted to the 1995 summer class of the Virginia Student Recruitment and Retention Program and became a member of the class of 2000. So thank you both. It is your insistence and interventions that enable me to contribute to this history of African American and Black theater pedagogy and production at William and Mary. So each semester I begin by offering students an opportunity to share a little bit about their entry point into the course material. In the spirit of this pedagogical practice, I would like to share a little bit about what brings me to this disciplinary interest. In Paul Carter Harrison's Kuntu drama, which I read much later after my days as an undergraduate, Harrison stated that directors of Black theater must prepare themselves, quote, with the knowledge of corresponding African and African American mythologies and be able to discern the motivating responses of Black people to certain rhythms, end quote. My preparation included 4 developmental events that opened my ears to the drums and my eyes to the life-giving, spirited, dynamic forces within Black theater, the mode in which I primarily work. So, developmental step number 1. My spirit of rhythmic discernment was very informed by music introduced to me by my father, Larry Green Sr. My carefully curated pre-Tack lecture list includes music by Florence Price, James Brown, the Fisk Jubilee Singers, John Coltrane, Aretha Franklin, Yusef Lateef, Sheun Kuti, and Egypt 80, among others. Some of these songs were on playlists for shows that I directed. Other songs were listed in the stage directions of plays that I'll reference tonight. And a few of the songs add a multi-vocal storytelling element to tonight's talk in the music of my own voice, right? So I'm adding another layer of my voice to this talk as we go along this evening. Developmental step number 2. My embodied study of Isheshe, Ifa, Ati, Odisha, and its many diasporic formations is a shaping force in my work. Through my initiation into its sacred systems, a theoretical language emerged for a methodology that was clearly arising in my work since returning to William and Mary as a faculty member. In my teaching and research, I advance a non-Western critical language for understanding Black theater dramaturgies by primarily using the practical elements of Yoruba cosmology to track, name, and illuminate a play's impulses and interior world, and as a blueprint from which to source performance and staging concerns. In production and publication, I weave egun cloths, or intertwine elements of an Africanist past into the present, binding the spiritual and material worlds. Developmental step number 3. My days as a literary reader for the Playwrights Development Institute with ETA Creative Arts Foundation, the cultural and social anchor for Chicago's Southside Black community. I was deeply fortunate to become involved with ETA and PDI under the leadership of the late Abena Joan Brown. That would be the wonderful elder in the center. and the former producing artistic director, Kimati J. Porter, to the left of her. These two women were bold, brassy, and they loved Black people, and that is their motto for service. Beyond providing local entertainment, ETA was acutely concerned with the quality, social enlightenment, and aesthetics of the work presented on their stage. The legacy of the PDI provided me with an enriched social and intellectual grounding to fortify my own commitment to develop quality theatrical experiences that resonate with the worldview of the Black community. And developmental step number 4. My participation in the National Endowment for the Humanities Institute, Black Aesthetics and African-Centered Cultural Expressions, Sacred Systems and the Nexus Between Cultural Studies, Religion, and Philosophy. I was one of 25 scholars selected to study with Paul Carter Harrison. That is him to the left with a student when he came to William & Mary, and myself with him after that lecture, as well as one of my other mentors, Dr. Joanne Braxton, who also went to the same NEH Summer Institute with me. So in studying with Paul and several other Black luminaries on developing a critical language for evaluating Black art, so too, as I was taught at ETA, affirm the tradition and evaluate it on its own terms. While there, I worked on fleshing out my ideas on what I call the ethnocultural dramatic structure, and my NEH project ultimately became a book chapter called Resurrecting Phantom Limbs of the Dismembered Slave and God, Unveiling the Africanisms in Gem of the Ocean, published in August Wilson's Pittsburgh Cycle, Critical Perspectives on the Plays. So about 2 weeks ago, one of our industry trade publications, American Theater, published an article called The HBCU Edge that influences the thoughts I'll share tonight. The overall argument of the article is that the HBCU environment is a place of magic that provides the kind of support and nurturing that enables Black and brown students to achieve excellence in the theater industry. Okay, I agree. HBCUs are wonderfully affirming places for both students and faculty. Morgan State University Theater hired me a year after grad school. After my appointment at Morgan ended, Chicago State University hired me and later tenured me and promoted me. And in my exit interview with Dean Rachel Lindsay, she told me, quote, "I know your new dean, this would be Carl Strickwerder. You would not have gotten this job without the experience that you gained here." Now, what she was telling me in that moment was, don't forget who raised you up, okay? However, and fortunately, I was returning to my alma mater, where my existing intellectual and cultural awareness was further tempered as I tiptoed into the canon of African American and Black theater many years prior. Thus, William & Mary also played a role in my rearing. Some of my best memories of William & Mary as a student involved the self-discovery that emerged through identity-affirming theater making and the pride that deepened with each story told, whether that was in the classroom, the Commonwealth Auditorium, the studio theater, or the PBK main stage. Wherever the epistemology of the African diaspora was centered, it gave me a ground to stand on. And now, as a faculty member, some of my best teaching is tied to providing the same opportunity for students who desire to be involved with William & Mary Theater, majors or no. Admittedly, I grow frustrated with the juxtaposition of the HBCU theater experience and the HWI, PWI, that is historically white institution, predominantly white institution, theater experience for Black and brown students within our disciplinary dialogue, as the arguments made in one case or the other are never a one-size-fits-all in each category. Predominantly or historically white educational theater systems also produce resourceful, culturally conscious, and proud, psychologically healthy scholar artists ready for graduate programs, the theater industry, and beyond. William & Mary is one of them. But as Dr. Iya Osun Olomi Jonio Jones says, "My joy is in the building. There is a lot of heartbreak. This work is not easy." In The Untethered, Homecoming 2020, conceived, written, and directed by Francis Tanglao Aguas, over haunting music, we hear the voice of alum Sumie Yatsukura stating, quote, "Over the ensuing decades, many students and faculty of color did not feel a complete sense of belonging in the theater department. Even so, they made great efforts to seize every possible opportunity and to establish spaces for future generations," end quote. So tonight I will share what I've discovered thus far about the seizures and establishments within the 60-year history of African American and Black theater pedagogy and production at William & Mary. Within the department and across campus, this institutionalization of this work is an effort that in a few cases is shared across color lines. So I begin with a brief overview of the history of William & Mary Theater for context. I discuss the advent of the African American presence on the main stage, the development and interventions of identity-affirming student organizations, as well as faculty hiring and collaborations that contributed to the growing presence of this identity-based work within the curriculum and across campus stages. I will also isolate moments from the William & Mary Theater production archives that illustrate a clear distinction between African American theater and Black theater. Theater making in Williamsburg is older than the United States' Declaration of Independence from Britain, and William & Mary plays a key historical role in its development. The alma mater of the nation and the second oldest institution of higher learning in North America is credited with 4 known theater-related firsts. In 1702, William & Mary students performed a pastoral colloquy for the royal governor, the first recorded theatrical performance in America. In March 1716, William Livingston, owner of the first theater in America, was given permission by the William & Mary Board of Visitors in Williamsburg to, quote, "make use of the lower room at the south end of the college main building for teaching the scholars and others to dance until his own dancing school in Williamsburg be finished," end quote. This dancing school would become the Playhouse, constructed somewhere between 1716 and 1721. On September 10, 1736, William & Mary students presented Joseph Addison's Cato, the first known collegiate production. And in 1926, William & Mary became the first liberal arts college in Virginia to offer a play production course under the instruction of Ms. Althea Hunt, an assistant professor of English and the director-teacher for the Dramatic Club. Under Hunt's leadership, the initial pedagogical approach to developing student artistic skill was through production stimulation, either observing performances or staging performances with the support of units such as art and home economics. So 38 years after the inception of the formal theater training at William & Mary, the evidence indicates that African American involvement in theater making practices on our campus begins on the William & Mary Theater main stage. In 1963, the same year theater and speech was departmentalized, Oscar Blayton arrived at William & Mary as the first African American undergraduate to integrate the college. He was advised to spend minimal time on campus beyond attending his classes. However, Blayton did the exact opposite, engaging in one of the university's most public-facing activities. He found the rehearsal halls of Phi Beta Kappa Memorial Hall to be, quote, the most judgment-free environment, end quote, at the time of his participation. Though Blayton played only supporting roles during his tenure, he looms large in our institution's history as the first Black undergraduate to desegregate the 1964-65 main stage season of William & Mary Theater. It was Howard Scammond's desire to solve a casting challenge that brought Blayton to the main stage. At the beginning of his sophomore year, while registering for classes, Scammond approached Blayton stating, I have a problem. I either need to find a piano player that I can make look like a Negro, or I have to find a Negro that I can make look like a piano player. Blayton could not play the piano. However, had he not auditioned and subsequently performed the role of Wesley, William Saroyan, in William Saroyan's Time of Your Life, that production could have been the first production on our campus to use brownface, or the practice of wearing makeup to imitate the appearance of a non-white person. Yet, according to Professor Emerita Trish Wesp, there's evidence that indicates that this distinction would go to the department's 1971 production of You Can't Take It With You by Moss Hart and George Kaufman. Black characters Reba and Donald play supporting roles in this comedy. However, in the absence of a black male actor to play the role of Donald, a white actor was heavily made up to appear Hispanic to solve the casting challenge. Blayton would appear again on the main stage at the close of the 64-65 season in an ensemble role as a mad priest in The Duchess of Malfi, and in the Backdrop Club's production of Carnival in the following month as one of the 3 spear-holding roustabouts. As he neared the conclusion of his sophomore year, Blayton wanted to change his major from pre-med to theater. However, his father had established a successful medical practice in Williamsburg, and the expectation of his mother was that following med school, he would, quote, carry on the tradition and follow in his father's footsteps. But Blayton's, quote, heart wasn't in it. He, quote, liked acting, and having found the social group he sought through football but never found, he was inspired to audition for the Jamestown Corporation's outdoor symphonic drama, The Common Glory, in the spring of 1965. Scammon, who was directing this production on America's Pursuit of Independence, was initially reluctant to cast, or resistant, not reluctant because he ultimately didn't cast him, but his argument was, quote, I really would like to give you a part, but you don't look like Thomas Jefferson or George Washington, so I would have a hard time pulling that off, end quote. Scammon was concerned with the audience's ability to suspend their disbelief. Instead, he encourages Blayton to audition for the William and Mary Choir under the direction of Dr. Carl Fair. During the audition, Fair first asked Blayton to sing 2 Negro spirituals, neither of which Blayton knew. According to Blayton, this sent Fair from annoyed to vexed. Fair then asked him to sing Irving Berling's God Bless America, which Blayton says he also did not know. Irritated by Blayton's ignorance of the 2 Negro spirituals he was asked to sing, and exasperated over his seeming lack of patriotism for not knowing God Bless America, Fair reportedly calls Blayton a communist, and the audition ends unsuccessfully. As fate would have it, Blayton would get to work with Fair anyhow, as he was the musical director for the summer production of Common Glory. According to Blayton, choreographer Myra Kinch was, quote, desperate for additional dancers, extras to play townspeople, soldiers, and convicts. Blayton and his 2 friends, Bob Weeks and John Kirkpatrick, were cast, but with a condition that they undertake weekly lessons from Kinch's prima ballerina prior to the start of rehearsals early June. Besides offering him a paid opportunity to continue working with his peers and other professionals, Blayton's performance in The Common Glory opened the door to another learning opportunity, and that is performing in Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. With Midsummer, Blayton would close out his time at William and Mary, playing in a 20-member entourage of fairies. Of the experience, Blayton recalls, quote, the company saw to it that everybody who wanted to participate had a role, and so that we could also get paid. That is why the retinue of fairies was inflated for this production, end quote. After The Common Glory and Midsummer, Blayton received 2 additional offers to perform in plays. Speaking from memory, he says that a children's theater company asked him to perform as Rumpelstiltskin, and another offer came from the Wedgwood Playhouse, a local dinner theater on Route 60 that operated from 1963 to 1973. Quote, he says, "I thought I was going to have a career in theater," end quote. Yet before he could perform in either production, he was drafted into the Marines. He eventually completed his undergraduate studies at the University of Maryland, College Park, and then attended Yale School of Law to study international law with a focus on human rights. So 4 years after Blayton's departure in 1965, the Black Student Organization is formed. In the absence of an organized group of Black actors at William & Mary, much of the early interventions to populate the campus with forms of Black expressivity came by way of the BSO and their relationships with internal and external partners. So what began in 1971 as Black Awareness Week became Black Cultural Week in 1972 and Black Odyssey in 1976. During these periods of galvanized activities to promote Black cultural awareness within the intellectual life of the community, the BSO organized talks by political thought leaders, civil rights activists, comedians, poets, and literary experts. The organization also built bridges with local HBCUs by inviting performing arts ensembles to campus, such as the Norfolk State University Jazz Ensemble and the Hampton Institute Players, a university acting troupe. There is evidence of a BSO-sponsored performance of The Last Minstrel Show by the Hampton Institute Players on March 8, 1971. Now, The Last Minstrel Show was an original work by Dr. Miles W. Coiner Jr., pictured here, a professor in the HU's Department of Speech and Drama. The play was not an actual minstrel show, quote, but rather an extension and parody of one, end quote. The following month, the Botetourt Bibliographical Society invited Dr. Coiner back to campus to give a lecture on The Theater of the Absurd as Political Metaphor, 3 Modern Romanian Playwrights. In 1972, BSO performers staged a sketch comedy of a Black church service in the manner of Flip Wilson's variety show as part of Black Culture Week. During Black Odyssey Week in 1976, the BSO invited the Hampton Institute Players back to campus to perform a one-act play called Say Grace and readings of 2 additional plays. And what's not on the screen, I discovered, is also a touring production by the Alliance Theater Company for Colored Girls. They came to William & Mary, I believe, in either 80 or 81, and then they went on to Old Dominion University. In 1984, the BSO partnered with the Office of Minority Affairs to bring a college touring production, of Esther Roll's one-woman show, Ain't I a Woman? In addition to internal partnerships and external collaborations that brought Black entertainment to campus, BSO members were active in the campus and community theater productions. The founder and first president of the BSO, Dr. Warren Buck III, the first African American to graduate from the physics department in 1970, was involved with a student performance of Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice as the Prince of Morocco. In his oral history conducted with Carmen Bolt as part of the 50th anniversary of residential desegregation at William & Mary, we can actually hear him reciting some of the lines. He says, quote, "Mislike me not for my complexion, the shadowed livery of the burnished sun, to whom I am neighbor and nearest bred," end quote. Dr. Buck was also cast as Schroeder in the Williamsburg Players staging of the musical, which you see right here, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. Of his theater experience, Dr. Buck states, quote, "All that acting helped me, I think, find my voice better. I could feel confident. It gave me presence that I too have things to say and I want to say them," end quote. Another former president of the Black Student Organization, Mr. Earl T. Granger, was also involved in theater during his time here. Of the BSO's role in creating a conduit for the community and the development of Black performance at William & Mary, Granger says, quote, "I think the BSO really provided that venue or opportunity or pathway for young African American students to express themselves as part of a collective," end quote. In his junior year, Granger participated in the William & Mary second season production of George C. Wolfe's The Colored Museum, a satirical exploration of Black identity and all its contradictions. The performance was a senior directorial for Gina Clayton of the class of '90. In 1988, Granger's incoming class had the largest cohort of African American students in the history of William & Mary. This is something he says in his oral testimony with Carmen. This was evident in the show's casting, however, which was a collective effort supported by the BSO advisor, Dean Carroll Hardy, and William & Mary Athletics, because Gina told me that several males in the cast were football players. The stage directions call for, quote, "an ensemble of 5, 2 men and 3 women, all Black, to perform all the characters that inhabit the 11 exhibits," end quote. However, Clayton cast 13 of her peers to play 27 characters, Granger among them. He performed in 3 of the exhibits: Get on Board, the Photo Session, and the Party. Clayton, born and reared in Surrey County, had the support of her hometown for this production. Trustees of the Surrey Foundation, one of which included Attorney Gerald Poindexter, the first Black county attorney for Surrey County, as a noted production sponsor. I think she told me in our interview that the Surrey Foundation gave $750 toward their production. Among those listed for special thanks include our current Associate Vice President for Alumni Engagement, Matthew Brandon. No, that is not Brandon, but this is the picture from the Colored Museum that I wanted you to see that I clearly skipped over. Here we are, Matthew Brandon, and also actor Ossie Davis. So Mr. Davis was on campus. He was giving a keynote talk sponsored by the Office of Minority Affairs at the time, and students convinced him, this is the story that Gina is telling me, to come to the performance. And so he comes and reportedly, quote, was both educated and entertained, end quote. Farisha Tucker, wonderful, we're back on track, and Marlene Fuller. So Farisha, now I think, there we are. That's Farisha. And this is Marlene. Also, seniors would go on to direct in the director's workshop the following month. So that's this program here. Tucker directed a scene from Alice Childress's play, Mojo. Fuller, who was also the vocal coach for Marlene's play, directed a scene from Ted Shines's Herbert III. However, Clayton appears to be the first Black theater major to produce a senior directorial, and that is of all the evidence that I can find to date. So this would be 1990. After graduation, she did an internship with Portland Stage Company and later received an MA in cinema TV production from Regent University. She now teaches English and theater at Surrey County High School, where she also coaches the drama club. So these early seizures and establishments, largely by the Black Student Organization, began to shift into faculty hiring. So in 1982, the Department of Theater and Speech began to diversify its faculty under the leadership of Dr. Richard Palmer. Palmer hired Dr. Omiyẹmi Joniel Jones, who galvanized Black expressivity among students in her classes through their performances of, quote, poetry, short stories, and excerpts from novels, end quote. Jones, one of 2 Black faculty hired that year by the university, came to William & Mary from the University of Maryland, where she had been teaching since 1978. And she came here to teach courses in speech. Quote, students were excited by the performance work they were doing. They wanted to do more, to have a more public sense of the work, she says. With their energy and will, she approaches Palmer, who agrees to departmentally, I want to pause there. So Palmer agrees to departmentally sponsor the Black Thespian Society. So this characteristic of department sponsorship is important. To date, the Black Thespian Society is the only identity-based theater producing organization to hold that distinction, not the Multicultural Performing Arts Society, which was established in 1994, the African American Theater Club, which was established in 1996, or the International Performing Arts Exchange, established in 2007. This was a forward-thinking step towards alignment with William & Mary's mission to provide a personalized educational experience for its students, not as an ancillary accessory to dangle in front of them, but to cement a necessary equitable presence in its training program and an investment of time, talent, and treasure, as Earl likes to say, in the self-determination of Black students who would see themselves at the center of training and the industry. So although not the current practice, embracing this move by Palmer to position an identity-based organization within the fabric of the department could be a promising step towards furthering the institutionalization of identity-affirming work within William & Mary Theater. In the spring semester, the Black Thespian Society performed for the award-winning poet Gwendolyn Brooks. This is the Black Thespian Society here. We've got Joni here, and these are her students. They are now performing for the award-winning poet Gwendolyn Brooks. They also initiated a series of monthly lunchtime readings in the Lab Theater, so this is an ongoing presence that they have established, right, within the department. And with this performance, here of the Harlem Renaissance Revisited, it was a compilation of works from Harlem Renaissance writers. So while here, Jones also worked with Dr. Bruce McConaughey, who served on the faculty for 21 years before heading to the University of Pittsburgh. Quote, at his request, end quote, they attempted to devise an adaptation of Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin called Going Home to Freedom. Of this experience, Jones says, quote, because of my training at Northwestern in interpretation, I had a very strong idea about what could happen with narration, some of the nuances that could happen if you had people saying the same line, end quote. But McConaughey, quote, did not like what he saw, end quote, in her draft. Due to creative differences, McConaughey would go on to complete the adaptation to be directed later by VSF artistic director Leslie Muchmore 3 years later. The Colonial Echo describes Going Home to Freedom as, quote, an all too rare opportunity to appreciate the wealth of Black thespian talent at William & Mary. According to Professor Emerita Trish Wesp, who was here at the time, the production included Christy S. Coleman, the current executive director of the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation, and actress Linda Powell. But Jones would not see the realization of Going Home to Freedom. Following the success of the Harlem Renaissance Revisited, she left William & Mary for Howard to be closer to her family, to begin her doctoral studies, and where, quote, discussions of Africa and the African diaspora were just a natural part of everyday talk. What was hard for her here, she says, quote, was the entirety of Williamsburg. It felt like a place that was deeply committed to reenacting colonialism. That mindset seemed to characterize the entire city, so I never felt comfortable in town, end quote. She eventually retired as a professor emerita of theater from the University of Texas, Austin. It has a wonderful book that was published, 22, I believe, or 21, Theatrical Jazz, amazing. In Jones's absence, Palmer, according to Wesp, quote, worked with the Black Thespian Society on a couple of projects in the mid to late 80s, end quote. Evidence for at least one of these projects includes a production program for a project titled God's Children, a devised work of readings and improvisations. Now, the program doesn't list the performance as a Black Thespian Society production, and nor does Gina Clayton, who, as I said earlier, was a class member of 1990, who would have been a freshman that semester, recall any references to the organization. But this discrepancy aside, God's Children included 53 pieces, of both original work by students. Farisha Tucker was one of them, and Nancy Gunn was another, and established writers and artists such as Langston Hughes, Alice Walker, Owen Dodson, Ernest J. Gaines, Tejumola Ogboni, and Janie Hunter. God's Children ran from October 16th through the 19th, 1986 in the Studio Theater, and premiered at the Virginia Theater Conference the following week. So according to the program note, most of the students involved in God's Children were from suburbia. The project, which explored the Black rural consciousness, allowed them to rediscover the rural roots of their personal heritage. Themes explored in the material included the church, hardship, strength and wisdom of old people, the complexity of relations between men and women, the difficulties and buoyancies of childhood, the need for young to escape and change, the constant pull of home, and the hope for a better tomorrow. This was all in the program. In the section on coming events, audiences are put on notice of forthcoming auditions for two-act plays by acclaimed actor and playwright Dr. Femi Yuba, who had just become a member of the William and Mary faculty 2 months prior. So Yuba was hired by the department chair at the time, Christopher Bowl, because of his expertise in, quote, African and Afro-American drama. According to the chair's statement in Alumni News, which is a departmental newsletter that was published at the time, Yuba's work, quote, added a whole new dimension to the curriculum. As an instructor of theater, Yuba taught beginning acting and intermediate acting. In his acting courses, he brought a unique approach to final scene work, allowing students to improvise their final monologues based on their own ideas and ingenuity. Quote, I know that my acting class was being watched from upstairs, end quote. But, quote, it seemed to go over well. Additionally, Yuba taught 2 sections of an advanced topics course, and the registrar and I were going back and forth on what the exact title of this class was, but because we only had paper copies and it was reduced to a certain number of characters, we think it was called African Survivals in the New World. The survey in African and Afro-American drama, which we are clear, that's what it is, also cross-listed in American Studies included playwrights such as Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Wole Soyinka, Lorraine Hansberry, and Douglas Turner Ward. According to Yuba, students, mostly white and a few Black identifying, were, quote, quite responsive to the course. With Yuba's hiring and offering of this identity and aesthetic-based course on plays, both African and from Afro-American playwrights, the roots of Black theater pedagogy were beginning to be planted within the curriculum. Beyond his curricular interventions, Yuba is also the key figure in the positioning of African theater within the production season at William and Mary, in his direction of The Riddle of the Palms and Crocodiles in 1987, and with Wole Soyinka's The Trials of Brother Jero in 1988. Between his class offerings in these productions, students will begin to develop the critical language to adequately analyze art that contains the heartbeat of Africa, or the song, the dance, the drum, and the image within the language. According to the Flat Hat, Riddle and Crocodile, which were self-authored by Yuba, quote, deal with the universal theme of greed, a theme blended with African settings and characters to produce an intriguing and innovative dramatic experience, end quote. Now, of his own work, Yuba tells the Virginia Gazette writer James Schultz that, quote, I use rituals theatrically, for example, in A Riddle of the Palms. However, this view of the play as a, quote, ritualized context of reality, end quote, or, quote, a living incantation that focuses and releases power to the audience, quote, was completely lost on Schultz, who in his review just a few days later, titled A Blizzard of Forced Metaphors, made clear the importance of preparing our students with the ability to review art beyond the white gaze. The blizzard of Eurocentricity that kept Schultz from reviewing Yuba's work fairly and through the cultural traditions from which it was birthed was aptly criticized by Associate Professor Emerita of Romance Languages, Claire Mather of St. Olaf College, who left William & Mary in 1990. In her reading of Schultz, and I do mean this in both the critical and colloquial sense of the term, she writes to the Virginia Gazette editor, quote, I am offended by the cultural chauvinism and short-sightedness that informed Schultz's analysis of the plays. I find Schultz's failure or refusal to understand the dramatic use of poetic language suggests that he is not familiar with or was unwilling to take into account the vital role verbal image plays in African oral tradition from which indigenous theater has developed, end quote. Despite Schultz's criticism of both plays, in Riddles of the Palm, a student performer standout for him was Adria Renee Tops, now Adria Renee Harjo. He describes her performance, quote, as silky and smooth as the palm wine she sells, quote. Riddle is all too briefly anchored by Tops's performance. Harjo went on to pursue her MFA in film from Howard University and now has a successful career in directing, producing, and working with visual effects. Unable to secure a permanent position, Yuba left William & Mary after 2 years. Having, quote, grown up in the open near Lagos, Nigeria, he preferred small towns like Williamsburg. In our interview, he spoke fondly of Bruce McConaughey, who took him around so that he could buy a car. He has since retired from Louisiana State University, a position that Henry Louis Gates Jr. helped him to secure. So 9 years after Yuba's departure and the department's inability to secure a permanent faculty line, there are 3 more Black and African identifying faculty members who joined the faculty ranks of what would become Theater, Speech, and Dance between 1997 and 2004. 2 of these colleagues, Dr. Marvin McAllister, the M. Gracie class of 1939 professor from 1997 to 98, and Dr. Yasmin Lambert, who now goes by Eve Graves, but at the time of her hiring, it was Yasmin Lambert, an assistant professor from 1998 to 2004, were hired shortly after their postdoctoral studies. So this is Yasmin here. During Graves' tenure, the first play resonant with the values of Black theater production is produced on the William & Mary Theater main stage with a predominantly Black cast, written by a Black woman, and that play is The Tapestry, over there, by Alexis DeVoe. So I'm going to circle back to The Tapestry momentarily, but I'm going to offer a few notes here. Though directed by the beloved Susan Chast, that's her there at the top, in the spring of 2000, Graves performed the role of Jet, the central character, and her performance with the students was, quote, a unique opportunity, as professors did not often have starring roles in the productions. The production also felt like a graduation for 3 of the cast members who had been involved in the African American Theater Club but had not performed on the William & Mary Theater main stage. I was one of them. That would be Sister Lot, Lisa Woods as Lavender, and John Bond as the Reverend. Immediately following The Tapestry, Graves directed Crossing a Deep River by Dr. Joanne Braxton, Professor Emerita of English and Africana Studies, Deep River was performed at the Monuments of the Black Atlantic Conference, a 5-day convening co-sponsored by William and Mary, the William and Mary Middle Passage Project, the Collegium for African American Research at the University of Southern Denmark, and the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. I remember this year because I was in this show. This would be my 5th year, and I was one of 3 characters. It was a show, a good show. In the year prior to her departure from William and Mary, Graves directed The Piano Lesson by August Wilson, a play for which I read over 60 people would audition for. Now, this is noteworthy because there were only 8 roles in the production, and Graves makes a striking choice for this production in her use of non-traditional casting. So we have a white identifying student here, Aaron Orensky, as one of the Black characters. There are no white characters on stage in this play, and I'm waiting to get some clarification on the role that this actor was portraying. 2 years following the departure of Graves, another assistant professor was hired, Martin Funky John Fusi, who remained with the university for 3 years. And while he was here, he directed a production of Woye Soyinka's The Swamp Dwellers in 2009 for the 2nd season. So now, situated between the departure of Dr. Yuba in 1988 and the arrival of McAllister in 97, another important milestone would occur on the William and Mary main stage. So in 1996, a group of students, many of whom were my peers, because we were all in the African American Theater Performance and History class at the same time. I got a couple of them sitting right here in the front row. So they would get to work with the text of the first Black book writer to be produced on the William and Mary Theater main stage. That would be our very own Professor Hermine Pinson. Walk Together Children, the product of collaboration between Pinson and Bruce McConaughey and the Williamsburg Grassroots Theater Project, was a story about America told through the lens of residents in Williamsburg and some of the surrounding communities about the pursuit of racial equality and the challenges of integration. A Poet, Walk Together Children was Pinson's first play. From a student perspective, Dr. Brian Boyd, class of 97, shout out to my friend sitting here in the front row. An actor in the production says, the public, quote, the public reaction that came from seeing Walk Together Children and being so fulfilled by the moment of being able to do something about our story, or to some degree, at least what was happening at Williamsburg in the time, was so inspiring, end quote. Dan White, pictured here, our friend, good brother Dan, participated in the play as a freshman. He transferred to Jackson State for the remaining 2 years of undergrad, but Walk Together Children was such a profound and personal main stage experience for him. So he and I talked on the phone the other night, and this is what he had to say. It was the first play that I had a chance to be in. In the play, people were talking about their experiences in Lightfoot and the integration of schools and all of these experiences of being the first Black person somewhere in that time. Those experiences really resonated with me. When I moved to Hampton from Mississippi, that was really the first time I experienced out-and-out racism. We lived in a model house in a nice community on the water. My parents were physicians. Neighbors used to call the cops on us every time. I was born in Mississippi. My grandfather, Dr. A.H. McCoy, was the president of the Mississippi chapter of the NAACP from 1950 to 1955. Medgar Evers worked for him as a field secretary. He was instrumental in convincing Mamie Till to open Emmett's casket. I came from a family where people threatened to kill my grandfather, people shooting up our house, the Klan. My parents came from that. When I grew up in Mississippi, my grandmother was a professor emeritus at Jackson State and was revered in the community. So he's juxtaposing, how he was growing up versus how his parents grew up. And so his grandmother was revered in the community, even by white people. So I didn't see any of the racism until I got to Virginia. When Walk Together Children came along and we got to tell these stories about our experiences with racism and integration in Virginia, I was ready to rock. He says further that, quote, this was not necessarily a black play, but it told black stories, and it was the first play of its kind at William and Mary. Professor Bruce McConaughey was great as a director, and having Susan Chass and Hermine Pinson come in and advise us was pretty amazing too. Pinson's role in the history of the developing black presence within the William and Mary community also extended to the classroom. In the same semester as the premiere of Walk Together Children, Pinson replaced Dr. Jacqueline McClendon as one of 2 co-instructors for what we thought was a new seminar. But remember, I told you earlier, Dr. Yuba taught a version of that when he was here. But now we have a seminar in theater called African American Theater History and Performance. And there are several important distinctions between this course and the one that was offered by Yuba some years prior. Yuba's course was an advanced seminar. McClendon, Pinson, and Chast's course was a freshman writing seminar. The advantage to this curricular shift, as I'm reading it, is that it invited deeper curiosities about theater, Africana studies, and even American studies much earlier in the student's academic career. Another distinction between the 2 courses is that McClendon, Pinson, and Chast's course was a team-taught endeavor between English and theater faculty. This intellectual pairing reinforced the interdisciplinary nature of the material, allowing students to think across disciplinary silos. Lastly, unlike Yuba's course, there was a performance element to this course. For some students without a theater background, like me at the time, acting and directing was a completely new endeavor. But this strategy, which began with a critical and reflexive, self-determined assignment that allowed each student some autonomy over how they would contribute to their final performance, yielded several rewards. For the kinesthetic learner, embodying the text through acting allows them to physically demonstrate their understanding of the literature. Directing is another point of entry for those with imagination and the ability to execute a vision, but perhaps has some anxiety about being visible in the same way as an actor. Everyone learned about time management and resourcefulness. And furthermore, for a class of black students, as we were in that class, it became a kinship community in a largely unfamiliar setting. Quote, the material and representation in this class and other classes, especially those which contain the work of playwright August Wilson, who had won 2 Pulitzer Prizes by this point for Fences and Piano Lesson, deeply inspired Dr. Brian Boyd, who's pictured right there, to create a space and community for us. Together with his friend, Dr. Marianne Williams, and a few other founding members, Boyd capitalized on the moment created through Walk Together Children and the African American Theater History and Performance class to establish the African American Theater Club. Between fall 1996 and spring 1999, the African American Theater Club produced August Wilson's Joe Turner's Come and Gone, Miss Honey's Youngins by J.E. Franklin, The Trip by Crystal Rhodes, and we got one of the actors sitting right here in the front row, and For Colored Girls by Ntozake Shange. Under my term as president of the African American Theater Club, we also partnered with the departments to sponsor visits by playwrights Ntozake Shange, who came in 2015, but she came before in 1998, and Alexis DeVoe in 2000, the playwright author of The Tapestry. Of the 4 plays produced by the African American Theater Club, who you see right here, some of the work that we did. Anybody know who that is? Indeed, indeed. I've lost my place. Where we go? Okay. Of the 4 plays produced by the African American Theater Club, Joe Turner, which is what we are engaging in right here, was the most advanced for this group of really, really young actors. It was also, though, at the time, the first known full-length drama written by a Black American male, produced at William & Mary on or off the main stage. Of his decision to produce the play, Boyd states, Joe Turner, which we read in the African American Theater Seminar, really resonated with me. As I read it, I could see my friends who could be in it. I was casting it in my mind a little bit. I remember the experience of us putting on that production, the camaraderie and the friendship that developed from it. We spent a lot of time together having fun and cutting up, but also trying to go about the serious business of putting on a production. I took very seriously what we were going to put out there. Now, Joe Turner was really symbolic because it would also be the first play that I would direct when I returned to William & Mary as a faculty. Actually, it wasn't the first play, it was the second play, come to think of it. But when I teach this play, the point that I'm making is that I often begin my lecture with sharing with my students that, you know, I thought this was a play about a man searching for his wife, right? Now, of this mistaken perspective about this play, that's really about the search for identity, self-authentication, and the reconciliation of one's past and present, Boyd says, you're right. It's another picture from this very, very gorgeous production. We were young and naive, and to some degree, didn't engage in a deep study of the text in rehearsal, but for some reason, I think we were still, in a way, spiritually connected to the material. We knew instinctively it was doing something for us, even if we couldn't put into words what it was doing for us. Now, though we lack the ability to name the experience, instinctively, Boyd and I are talking about the blues moment that marks every play in Wilson's American Century cycle. The blues moment is the instance which replicates his first encounter with Bessie Smith's "Nobody in town can bake a jelly roll like mine." What Wilson heard when he first listened to Smith is what Boyd and I and other members of the African American Theater Club felt, but couldn't name when we read Joe Turner's Come and Gone. The substance of the dramaturgy was a familiar part of our cultural intelligence, and it offered instruction on how to move through the world. Similarly, of this moment of realization, Wilson says, quote, my discovery of Bessie Smith and the blues provided me with an aesthetic with which to frame my growing ideas of myself in part of something larger. It was a moment of privilege and exaltation that comes from recognizing yourself as a vital part of a world that you had imagined. I would experience a similar moment, the realization that I was part of a larger collective consciousness that with recognition could work on my behalf while working on the tapestry. So now about the tapestry. In the play, Jet, the central character, is 4 days away from law school examinations. Now, in this liminal temporal space, tensions arise between Jet and her friends, her boyfriend Axis and her close friend Lavender, because she's expending much of her energy studying and working in the legal aid clinic. Now, rather than give Jet the space she needs to prepare for her final examinations, Axis has an affair with Lavender. The deception and subsequent demasking of the two people closest to her is earth-shattering, but Jet must overcome the agents of tension in the play. Agents of tension, please remember that, because now we're moving into the section of the talk about how we're going to talk about Black theater and African American theater, okay? So, Axis and Lavender are agents of tension. Now, Jet must overcome the agents of tension in the play that deceive her and in some way attempted to consume and neutralize her agency. Confronting these forces requires Jet's ability to navigate her emotional minefield, reconcile her spiritual and secular self, and confront her fears. Most urgently, she must also muster up the strength to study and to do well on her exams. Becoming a lawyer is a self-fulfilling goal, but it is also a means to serving her community. Like Jet, a few in the cast were seniors preparing to take off. The same age as Jet, who was 23, and at a critical crossroads in my own life, I felt insecure about the direction I planned to take and wanted to hear someone tell me that it was okay to go off script, that just because something holds true for you at age 10 doesn't mean that it still holds true for you at 23. My personal blues moment came when I heard DeVoe saying in our private reception, so she came to see the play, and there was a private reception before, and she gave us a pep talk, and this is what she says. If you want to write, write. If you want to act, act. Don't let anything or anybody keep you from doing what you want to do. And this is the part that landed with me. You dishonor all of the ancestors who paved the way before you when you do not pursue your dreams. I'm going to say that again. You dishonor all of the ancestors who have paved the ways before you when you do not pursue your dreams. These words were the moment of realization that changed the trajectory of my life from that point forward. Her words have stayed with me and guided me for the past 24 years. In hindsight, just as Jet was being baptized into a collective consciousness to, quote, give her what she needed for the morning to come, with the bookends of Joe Turner's Come and Gone near the beginning of my college experience and the Tapestry near the end of my tenure, I was being initiated into a particular ethos and style of theater that has inspired the work that I do now. Oh, okay. So to quote Mr. Wilford Cale, who graciously provided me with some coverage in the Virginia Gazette last Saturday, and if you have the print version, I would encourage you to look at the online version that has corrections. The $64,000 question, because this is how he phrased it when we were talking, is, what is Black theater vis-a-vis American theater? End quote. In the early 20th century, Black cultural critics began calling for a distinct social and sacred algorithm in Black theater. In the same year that Althea Hunt incepts the drama program at William & Mary, W.E.B. Du Bois would codify principles of Black theater that would serve as a springboard for all other ethical premises in the field. It was his opinion that Black theater should be by, for, about, and near Black people. A year later, in 1927, Alan Locke posited that the development of Negro dramatic art could be thought of, quote, without some significant artistic re-expression of African life, end quote. In his 1965 essay, The Revolutionary Theater, Amiri Baraka wrote, quote, theater should isolate the ritual and the historical cycles of reality, end quote. In 1968, Larry Neal asserted that this, quote, artistic re-expression, end quote, could be culled through a separate symbolism, mythology, critique, and iconology, end quote. In 1971, Ron Milner told us that Black theater, quote, must go home, quote, that it is, or that it must undergo, quote, a psychic, mental, aesthetic, and physical, end quote, migration back to Africa. With the drama of Nomo and Bantu drama, and in the much nearer but distant past towards a critical vocabulary for African diaspora expressivity, Paul Carter Harrison argued for the need to move beyond realistic conventions in Black theater towards a mode that connected us with Africa and, quote, released the transformative wisdom of African expressivity retained in the collective, albeit diverse, experience of the African diaspora, end quote. And in 2019, the pronouncement of the need for a clear aesthetic ideology in Black theater continued to be heard in Dominique Taylor's Don't Call African American Theater Black Theater is Like Calling a Dog a Cat. In this brief essay, he lays out half a dozen points or so for each style. I have condensed these things down to 8 as I near the conclusion of this talk. So, Black theater. is, in one sentence, American theater with an Afro-diasporic ethos and style at work, in text and production. And the way I break this down to my students is in the following 4 points. It's a practice, it's a methodology or a deployment of expressive strategies that are rooted in African constructs. We're talking about aesthetics here. 2, it's intercommunal. The play itself specifically asks, quote, how does this enhance the behavior, practices, and beliefs of Black people? This is Taylor talking in his essay. 3, structurally speaking, in the wake of disruption, psychic or otherwise, the character experiences a process of realization, that is, retrieval of ancestral memory, reconciliation of the past, i.e. the blues moment that I was talking about, that leads to spiritual renewal, that leads to new possibilities. 4, lifted out of the reality of the mundane through archetypal behavior of the characters, the wisdom of the myth tells us what to do and perhaps prevents the event from reoccurring in the future. And so we're reading these characters through archetypes that are African conceived. So plays within the William & Mary Mainstage season that I believe do this work textually or as a performance strategy include The Tapestry, directed by Chast, Piano Lesson, directed by Lambert at the time, now Graves, Joe Turner's Come and Gone, directed by myself, Crowns, directed by myself, Children's Hour, directed by myself, Gem of the Ocean, directed by myself, Dance of the Orcas, that would be me too. Wedding Band at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale would also be me. I want to show you some of these pictures here. Jen Helms, gorgeous. She's the costume designer for the production of Wedding Band by Alice Childress that I did at Southern Illinois University. And I wanted all of the characters to be conceived as Orisha archetypes on stage. And so we see here Fanny and thank you, because the name just completely escapes me, Julia, conceived here as Oya and Alshon. And her renderings, amazing. Top picture here would be Dance of the Orcas. These masks were done by Velicia. We have Oya here. We have Yemoja here. Oh mio. We have Elegba over here. We have Gem of the Ocean. One of the characters or one of the actors are sitting in the front row right now, right? But in this picture here, we see the Egun, the ancestors there at the bottom. This is a critical moment when Citizen has actually gone back to retrieve ancestral wisdom, but he has to first reconcile the past. He committed a crime, right? And he can't move forward until he acknowledges the past. And then this is a production I did of Hoodoo Love, which I didn't reference here, but I did it at ETA Creative Arts Foundation in 2013, right? Conversely, African American theater is a form of American theater laced with representations associated with Blackness. For example, we might be talking about slavery, histories of race and racism. It could be a docudrama, some exploration of pathology. We got a lot of that stuff going on Netflix and Hulu right now. The telling of our stories of overcoming disenfranchisement, instability, and disruption. Harrison describes it in this way. For most African Americans, it suffices if the expressive product in whatever genre simply tells our story, irrespective of how or what aesthetic choices are engaged to tell the story. 2, it's intra-communal in its aims to build bridges with others. Taylor says this in his essay. 3, it's usually contained within a well-made play structure with minimal to no loose ends at the end of the play. And 4, it's constrained to the mundane through the actor's use of psychological realism as opposed to an archetypal use as we might do it in Black theater, right, as an approach to realizing the character. So plays produced within the William and Mary main stage season that I believe do this work would include Walk Together Children, directed by Bruce McConaughey, Ruined, directed by me, Clybourne Park, directed by Tanglo Aguas, Our Lady of Cabejo, directed by Pamet, Citizen, directed by Larder, Hands Up, 7 plays, 7 testaments, that included a room full of directors, because there were a number of playwrights for that play. And by the way, Meet Vera Stark, directed by James. So, a literary treatment of each play in each category is way beyond the time constraints of this talk, which is coming to a conclusion. But in the Q&A or during reception, we can certainly talk more about these groupings. So in conclusion, history has shown that Black students at William & Mary have engaged in the work of African American theater and Black theater production in creative and resourceful ways. They, quote, find a way or make one, as Graves said to me in her interview. Black students that I spoke with, such as Gina Clayton, Lakia Green, Jason Blackwell, Tanya Busico, Christopher M. Richardson, and Peyton Robinson, all spoke of the importance of creating space for others in their work. In different ways, their current outlook and work seeks to create a new theater, not the one in which they were trained, but one that looks more like what the industry is trying to become. More nuanced in their understanding, critique, and discussion of different forms of theater, more thoughtful about who's in the room and who's not, and what stories are told and why. I look at their work, I hear their vision for a new American theater, and I ask, why would we still produce a season of entirely white playwrights without a deep interrogation of how far too often we default to what has always been done in the face of the challenges of doing something new? The work of students and faculty I have named and those I have not, both Black and white, desire more of us as an institution with a storied legacy of theater making. At the conclusion of the 24-25 school year, William & Mary will have offered 378 shows on the main stage. While there has been movement in African American theater and Black theater production, it currently makes up only 3.7% of the largest stage of our campus. Quantifying the amount of traction for faculty and student work in this area on the second season is difficult to gauge because information is inaccurate, it's missing, it's not up to date. As we near 100 years of William & Mary theater production, our North Star should be a reflection and a continual advancement of a curated environment where not only Black and brown students are seen and feel encouraged to seize and dig into their roots and cultural nuances and establish new ones as they wish while being acknowledged for who they are, but all students of the global majority. The walls of the new Phi Beta Kappa Hall Memorial Lobby are largely empty. So now is the time to write ourselves new stories that consider the makeup of the community in which it resides for all time coming. May we seize this moment and establish a vision. May the voices of our students continue to swell on. May they tell the world of their love for their alma mater with the drums sounding near and far. Hark, thank you. Gonna come down off my step stool. Happy to take any questions. I don't have on my glasses, so forgive me.
Dr. Green, thank you. That was
Professor Green, I dare now upset the PhD holders in the room. I do have a terminal degree, but I don't want to cause no problems in here tonight.
Professor Green. It was a fabulous lecture, and I really appreciate hearing you explain the difference between Black theater and African American theater. Tell me who you think the playwrights are now that we should be watching and producing here at William & Mary and elsewhere. I'm talking about Black playwrights.
Well, we're actively engaged in doing the work. We have done August Wilson. We've done 3 of those plays. That's always a great resource to go to, although the characters are older. We should be continuing to do the work of Lynn Nottage, which we have started to do. We should look at the work of Terrell Alvin McCraney. That would be a good one. We should also, I think we need to look at the work of Alice Childress. She's experiencing a resurgence right about now, and there's a wealth of material that we need to dig into. Wedding Band was one of them. We need to be looking at the work of Katori Hall. She is out in the public imagination right now, known for something that I won't mention in this venue, but she's got a canon. I would start there. I see your hand.
So I'm going to start with calling you Artisia because we started together, right?
Yes, ma'am. That's my academic effigy.
When there were no cohorts for African American faculty, I'm not going to say Black. But my question is this. You gave us a number of how many plays have been produced here. And then you gave us that percentage of the 3.77 percentage. This is my question. Of the faculty who produce these Black plays or African American plays, how does that percentage add up? Because the reality is this. Many of those plays you produce yourself, Omiyẹmi, and you can only do but so much.
Right.
So how does that percentage add up to the number of people who produce those plays? And how do we resolve that problem to, as you want, have many other images on the walls out there with faces that look like you and I without harming yourself and your health, right?
Right. So it has to be a collective work, a collective vision, a collective commitment. I talked to a colleague of mine, teachers at Loyola College, Chicago. They said that their commitment for their university is that 50% of their season would be dedicated to work of the global majority, and that there would be no expense spared, right? That could be time, talent, and treasure in trying to make that happen. And so, of course, I can't do it all, right? I'm editing a journal, and I'm behind on schedule, right? Because I've been working on this Tack lecture. And so more of us have to do the work.
And I have one more question, and then Hermine, I see you, but I do have one more question. So other director who didn't think that an African American could play George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, what would you think that they would think about Hamilton? And that's even rap.
I mean, we're in a different day and age now. So I'm of the opinion as it relates to non-traditional casting. First of all, bodies carry memory, they carry history. I need people to see me. I need to see my students when they come into a space. And so while a play may carry some universal meaning, there are unique considerations that should be given to every body that walks in a room. And I need to consider, and I think every director should consider the body in front of them when they're making these casting considerations. You don't want to take the audience completely out of the realm of a play so that they completely lose the meaning. And yes, we want to experiment with new ways of telling a story, but I'll give you an example. I had a student walk into one of my auditions for Ruined. It was a white student. She was good. I mean, really good. But I said to myself, if I cast her as Mama Nadi, Mama Nadi is running a brothel, pretty much. What does it look like to have a white identifying Mama Nadi running a brothel full of black women? I'm not trying to tell that story, and I'm not trying to tell that story here. In the name of education, it produces harm unnecessarily. Now, the student felt as if she had been denied an opportunity. I can respect that, and I want us to have a conversation about that. And we did have a conversation about that. That's where the education is. But in not creating harm on stage in the name of opportunities. So Professor Scammon may question deeply, to get to your question, what has happened with Hamilton. Oh, the concept. You're welcome.
First of all, congratulations on a wonderful lecture. Learned a lot. One of my questions is, how do you think your choices as director have changed in terms of the kinds of plays you want to put on stage between the first one you ever directed and dramaturged and up to now? How would you describe them in terms of your classification of the types of plays they are, realism versus surrealism, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, genre aside,
okay,
because I'm focused on the methodology, because I hear Paul in my head, like every time I'm in the room, and he's like, it's a methodology, my dear. You know, he's really presentational in this conversation, right? Which is why I can take something like the Children's Hour to prove a point that the work I'm doing can transcend a Katori Hall. It could transcend an August Wilson. It could transcend an Ntozake Shange, right? And I could still apply character archetypes. I could still look for the ritual within the work. There's nobody who could tell me, even though so many people have written about the Children's Hour, you cannot tell me that play is not a ritual to unmask a woman who had been living a lie. I see Mary, as a force to come in and create tension, to get Martha to be true to herself. And she is committing a grievance against the universe through living her lie. And so we're going to use the babies. As always, they see all things. And so I end that play, that production, for some of you who may have seen it, with new possibility. Then the text, Mary is, she's gone. And Karen is there just left contemplating her choice. I had Mary looking in the window, and Karen had to see her. And I had Bilal's Butterfly playing, which some of you may have heard playing here. It's talking about change. We don't want Karen to be left hardened. And we don't want her to not forgive Mary. Mary is young. Mary is a force. She came in and did her job. So you would have to hear Paul Carter Harrison tell you, right, when he's working on this production of King Hedley. Yes, it's King Hedley. And he says that he's working in the form of these archetypes. And at the end of King Hedley, yes, it is King Hedley. At the end of King Hedley, Ruby, I had to make sure I was talking about the right play. Ruby comes and shoots her son. right? And so one way of reading that is, oh, I done killed my baby, right? And your mother falls apart. That immediately puts us in an emotional state. But then you got to understand what has happened at the beginning of the play. Aunt Esther, the community ancestor, the woman of wisdom, the medicine that's going to heal the people, has died because the people have lost their way. They have stopped coming for knowledge and instruction. And so she was taken out of the community, and when she was taken out of the community, the lights went out. The people were left in darkness. And Wilson tells us at the beginning of the play, oh, the end is already written. It's about to be a problem. We have to make some kind of penance, some kind of sacrifice. Something has to happen to bring renewal back into this community. And we need the blood of the most potent person. And who is that? Who would that be? DeLorean. Who would that be? That would be King Headley II. We need the blood of the Son to come in and revivify the people. Now, if you're focused on the archetype, Ruby did what she was supposed to do. The blood comes, it spills, the cat meows. The end of the play, we back with Jim in the ocean, and who do we see? Aunt Esther, back in the community where she's supposed to be. But if you're stuck on, I've killed my son, you've taken the ritual out of the work. It is a ritual. That's where my work resides. I see you, Dr. Cork.
Thank you for a brilliant lecture. And I just wanted to, because you kind of gave us this powerful picture of the promise of Black theater and the need for it in the theater department. But so much of your work is also interdisciplinary. I've certainly benefited from collaborating with you and learning so much from you over the years and seeing the ways in which your work in theater spills over and affects students all across campus. And so I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit more about what is the promise of centering Black theater. What is that promise, not just for the theater department, but for changing the culture of William and Mary, for our relationship to the community in Williamsburg, these broader effects?
So the demographics in Williamsburg, African Americans are somewhere between 15 and 19%, right? Second population after white identifying people. We need to be producing work that looks like the community that the institution sits in. A model in my mind, and I would love it if we could see it here, is the Rights and Reasons program at Brown University. So their theater, Black theater work, which is in the vein of the work that I'm talking about, they have a partnership with Africana Studies. So Africana Studies and theater collaborate to produce this work. When I went to SIUC, that work in part was sponsored by the Office for Anti-Racism. It's a long acronym. My friend was there, right? But they started bringing in other units to co-sponsor the work. Let's talk about the work that you and I did when I was a baby here at William and Mary, right? Global social problems. We brought our students together. We figured it out. It was not the easiest thing to do, but we did it. Sociology and theater, having this conversation about ruined, right? We need to be doing more of that. Co-teaching, like the African American theater performance and history class. I would love to co-teach a theater class with one of my colleagues across the university, right? I tell my students all the time, theater is the most, because nobody can convince me otherwise, it is the most liberal of all of the disciplines in the liberal arts. Why? Because there's nothing that it doesn't touch. Nothing. And I'm not even the best person in math, right? But I know that in order to get this thing up here, somebody, okay, needs to know algebra, right? And so we need more of those kinds of partnerships. We keep hearing all the time how we need to break down the silos. This is a way to do it. Co-sponsor the work. Pre-show conversations, post-show conversations. Week-long interdisciplinary convenings around a particular play. That's in part what they started to do at SIU. See, I keep looking here because my bestie came to see the show with me. She was there, and that's what they were doing. So I would like to participate in more of that.
All right, we have time for one last question, and then we're going to enjoy the reception, please, out in the foyer. Thank you.
Oh, over here.
Where am I going?
I don't know. I heard your voice, and so I thought you knew
It's just me.
who or
Anybody?
where.
Going? Dr. Rio. Okay.
I mean, I'm happy to see the last question. That's a lot of pressure. But I did it. Sorry, hi, Omiyẹmi, it's Rio. I tried so hard to remember how you phrased this because I thought it was so beautiful. And then you hit me with the line about the descendants and how you have to live your dreams, and it just all flew out of my head. But the question I had is related to some of the things you've been talking about, and I wanted to just ask you very specifically about your teaching. Mm-hmm. And the line that I'm not going to get it right, but you talked about Joe Turner, and you said that you felt it, but that you couldn't
I couldn't name it.
You couldn't name it. Yes, thank you. What a beautiful line. And it just made me think of really good teaching. It made me think that feels like the essence of something important when we teach. Can you talk about your classes when your students look back on it 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What will you hope they can name that they felt?
So I'm not going to answer that question. I have one of my young people right here in the room who's a fully grown woman. She's right here. She can tell you. But I think it's best for her to speak.
Thank you for your lecture. To answer the question, first of all, I was not a model student. I just want to put that out there. But in the Black theater class that I took with Professor Omiyẹmi, what she instilled in me, and it's hard not to tear up if that is a remnant of the answer of my question that I'm trying to get out. She instilled in me the lessons of life that I needed to know, right? So understanding that my story isn't only slavery as a Black woman. Understanding that my ancestors, some of them chose to dive into the water, and some of them didn't, and I'm grateful for both of those stories. Instilling in me that even though I was going through so much strife and struggle at a predominantly white institution that I felt didn't see me sometimes, that my voice is invaluable. And that prepared me to go out into the world, right? To go out into the workforce. To go back to my family that didn't understand why the heck would I choose Africana studies as my major? How was I gonna make any money, right? All that kind of stuff. But I was able to take the lessons from her classroom and go back to my family and say, let's set up an ancestor altar, especially for Thanksgiving, right? Let's talk about the stories of the ones that have passed. Let's make a family tree and try to get back. Maybe we can't get back to the continent, but it's important for us to get back as far as we can, especially for the people that I plan to birth in the future. I want them to know where they came from. She's instilled in me so much wisdom, and she carries it all so gracefully. And I need you to know that. I know you know it, but I need you to know it times 1,000. You are everything. She instilled in me the practice of Isheshe,
Orisha, right? And being an initiate of Ifa. Being able to, at the time when I was on campus, believe it or not, I was a self-proclaimed and thought I would never change atheist because I was so anti-Christianity, because I couldn't believe that a religion could hold my people under so much pain and hardship. And she introduced me to a spirituality that I did not know existed through her class. And also I can credit that to Professor May Sanford as well. They both taught me so much, and now I am proudly, she's calling me DeLauren, but I also am known as Ifa Yanmadun, Fayemi, right? And Omo Shango, Kawo, Kabiesi. So all of these things that I have learned over the past few years and this spiritual transformation that I've had, I can credit to her. And that's way more than getting an A or a B in a class.
I think that was the last question. We now have to go out and have wonderful victuals. Andrea has got good stuff for us. So please enjoy yourself, fill your belly, sip on something. Let's talk. I'm here. And thank you so much for being here.